Chris has a problem. He walks into his favorite coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, same order, same seat, same routine, and the barista hands him his receipt. The price is higher. Again, Chris didn't get a raise. His rent didn't change. Nothing in his life changed. But somehow, his dollar is buying less than it did 6 months ago. So Chris does what any reasonable person does. He Googles it. And after 45 minutes of economic jargon and Wikipedia rabbit holes, Chris knows less than when he started. That ends today. Because inflation isn't complicated. It's actually one of the most logical forces in the entire economy. And once Chris understands it, once you understand it, you'll never look at a price tag the same way again. What is inflation, really? At its core, inflation is simple. Your money buys less than it used to. A dollar today is not worth what a dollar was worth in 1990. In fact, what cost $1 in 1990 costs roughly $3.25 today. That's not a glitch. That's inflation doing exactly what it does. But why does it happen? That's where it gets interesting. There isn't one type of inflation. There are several, and each one operates through a completely different mechanism. Chris is about to learn all of them. Type 1 demand pull inflation. Chris gets a bonus at work. A big one. He's not alone. The whole company does well. The economy is booming, and suddenly everyone has extra cash to spend. Everyone rushes out to buy new televisions, new cars, new everything. But the factories making those televisions? They're already running at full capacity. There are only so many TVs to go around. More buyers. Same number of products. What happens? Prices go up. It sounds almost unfair. Chris worked hard, earned his bonus, and now his purchasing power gets diluted because everyone else also has money. But that's the mechanism. More demand. Same supply. Higher prices. Type 2 cost push inflation. Now flip the scenario. Chris's favorite coffee shop isn't raising prices because everyone suddenly wants more coffee. They're raising prices because the cost of coffee beans tripled this year due to a drought in South America. The demand for coffee hasn't changed. People want exactly as much coffee as they always did. But the cost to produce that coffee has gone up. So the shop has no choice. They pass that cost on to Chris. Chris fills up his car. Chris buys groceries. Chris pays his utility bill. All of it moves together. JHM. Before we go any further, if you're finding this actually useful, hit that subscribe button right now. We break down economic concepts exactly like this every single week, and you're not going to want to miss what's coming up. Back to Chris. Type 3 production cost inflation. Chris opens a small business. A bakery. He sources his flour, butter, and eggs from local suppliers. Then, the suppliers raise their prices, not because there's a shortage, but because their own costs went up. Labor costs, packaging, transportation, all of it crept upward. Chris now faces a choice: absorb the costs and shrink his margins, or raise prices. He raises prices. This version of inflation is embedded in the production chain itself. It's not driven by consumer demand or a sudden supply shock. It's the slow, grinding accumulation of rising input costs that eventually surfaces as higher prices for everyone. Type 4 monetary inflation. Here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine the economy is running normally. People want the same amount of goods. The supply of those goods hasn't changed. Everything is stable. But now, for whatever reason, there is significantly more currency circulating in the economy. More dollars chasing the same number of products. Chris's paycheck didn't change. The store shelves didn't change. But if the money supply expanded dramatically, Chris's purchasing power quietly eroded anyway. The number on his paycheck stayed the same. What it buys quietly shrank. Hyperinflation, when it all breaks down, now take monetary inflation and multiply it by 1,000. This is hyperinflation. And it's not theoretical, it has happened in real countries with real consequences. Zimbabwe in the 2000s, Germany in the 1920s, Venezuela in the 2010s. The pattern is almost always the same. A government faces a fiscal crisis. They need money they don't have. Instead of raising taxes or cutting spending politically painful moves, they print more currency. Prices rise, so they print more. Prices rise faster, so they print more. At the peak of Zimbabwe's hyperinflation, prices were doubling every 24 hours. A loaf of bread that cost $1 at breakfast cost $2 by dinner. The currency became so worthless that people literally burned it for heat because it was cheaper than firewood. Chris stares at his coffee receipt again. It feels a little less dramatic now. Is inflation always bad? Here's the part that surprises most people. No. Moderate inflation most central banks target around 2% annually is actually considered healthy. It encourages spending and investment. If prices are slowly rising, people have an incentive to buy now rather than wait. Businesses have incentive to invest, expand, hire. Deflation falling prices sounds great on paper. But it's actually dangerous. If prices are falling, consumers wait to buy. Businesses slow production. Layoffs follow. It's a downward spiral that's historically very difficult to escape. So the goal isn't zero inflation. The goal is controlled inflation. Chris's situation depends entirely on one thing: whether his income grows faster than, slower than, or at the same rate as inflation. If his salary rises at the same rate as inflation, he stays even. No real gain, no real loss. This is why economists talk about real wages versus nominal wages. Nominal is the number. Real is what it actually buys. How to protect yourself, Chris doesn't want to just understand inflation. He wants to beat it. The answer is investment. Assets that grow stocks, real estate, index funds, businesses historically outpace inflation over long time horizons. Holding cash feels safe, but over decades, inflation slowly and silently erodes its value. $1 left in a savings account earning less than the inflation rate is, in real terms, getting poorer every single year. It doesn't feel like losing money. But mathematically, it is. The people who build real wealth over time are not the ones who earned the most. They're the ones who understood the game they were playing and made sure their money grew faster than the system quietly ate it away. Chris walked into a coffee shop confused about why his latte cost more. He's walking out understanding demand pull, cost push, production cost, monetary inflation, and hyperinflation. He understands why moderate inflation exists by design. He understands that the real question isn't whether inflation is happening, it's whether his assets are keeping up. And now, so do you. If this changed how you see money, share it with someone who's wondering the same thing Chris was. Subscribe for more economic concepts explained like this clearly, practically, and without the jargon. Because inflation is always happening. The only question is which side of it you're on.